We were going to start off with talking about the uh, DINR inquiry. Are you all familiar with that?
What is it? DN?
DINR decision, what is it? Not to return.
Determination of intent
Determinant
not
of
to return.
intention, I guess, intent. But anyway, teachers have to do that
Right.
if they're not going to return. And those reports are in April. But from OSSI, no, it wasn't from OSSI. It was from DCPS, right, John Paul? John Paul, DCPS, it was very closed-mouthed about sharing that kind of information, which is
Well, I think their hesitation is that that it's a point in time document, and so things change throughout the sort of March through August, really. And so they're not entirely comfortable with sharing all of the numbers or information beyond what has already been shared in the council documents, because they don't want sort of decisions to be made around a number that isn't exactly accurate at any one time. Does that,
so.
make sense?
Would it be in our purview to ask them for that information in September?
Potentially, yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we would do that in September so that we could look at how many teachers were in the building and were new teachers and were returning teachers, and how many people submitted that DINR and when they submitted it. Since this year is not as much of a bastard year as last year was.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about trying to figure out how many, I mean, the goal, right, would be to figure out how many teachers left this year, right?
Right.
Okay.
Because we still haven't, we'll get Mary Levy's report, which kind of bleeds into another part of what we're talking about. But what I've heard from a couple of people in DCPS is that the numbers this year and last year were sort of the same.
Yeah, I think anecdotally that's what we've been hearing from a number of people, right? That the worry, right, was that there would be a large influx of folks leaving after this pretty traumatic year, but that the numbers overall have not necessarily shown that. And I think that's true nationwide as well. And Caitlin may know better than I do. If I remember right, there was an article in the Roundup 2 weeks ago, maybe, from, I don't remember if it was Ed Week or somewhere, was talking about the trends that they were seeing sort of nationwide about teachers leaving, that it wasn't as dire a situation as had been feared.
Well, the thing about it, that's why the numbers this year will be skewed differently, I think, because I think a lot of, from what I was hearing, and this is just anecdotally, what I was hearing is that a lot of teachers thought about leaving, but then decided since they were going to be doing it online that they weren't going to do it this year. But probably after the impact, because all the teachers are being impacted, at least in DCPS, are being impacted. I think that after the impact scores come in, from what I've been hearing is that some of the teachers are very dissatisfied with their impact scores. And that might cause them to leave, even though it's all been done online or hybrided, like quarter hybrid or whatever, in the last couple of months. So we're really not going to get any kind of actual true statistics about teacher retention like we had in 17, 18 and 18, 19. or maybe 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19 too, than we would have with 1920 and 2021. Because those three before were in-person teaching leaving. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Alistair, do you understand?
Sorry, I
I
was
mean,
distracted. So Ebony Rose had a death in the family.
Oh, my
Um,
gosh.
So she's not going to make it. And I don't have details, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up on that.
Okay.
And I missed the last part of what you were saying. I heard everything that John Paul said last, but I didn't hear what you said.
I was just saying that the figures for 1920 and 2021, as far as teacher attrition or retention, are going to not be, they're going to be weird compared to 1918, 18, 17.
Like
Yes, it's definitely going to be hard to compare
Right. I don't,
over the couple of years. I mean, it's good to have the information.
Yeah.
You know, we'll just have to have very large asterisks to remind people in, 15 years when they look back at this work again, like, oh, that's right, there was a pandemic.
because the thing about it is you're not going to even be the comparison between 19 and 20 and 20 and 21 are going to be different. If we go back, and probably 21, 22 is going to be different too, because I can't imagine schools going back full time in the buildings in August. I don't know how y'all feel about that.
I mean, they are, right? Like that's
what
the
she
instruction
said.
is that they will be.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any more about that? Teacher retention, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this OSSI educator preparation program. I'd like to get your feedback about what you think about it and what you think is good about it and what you think we need to talk to them about. And before that, though, John Paul, what do we have? What kind of advisory power do we have about that at all, besides bully pulpit stuff?
On teacher prep programs?
Yeah.
So when they were here, when Aussie came last week to talk about they call them educator preparation programs, but
Right.
EPPs, TPPs, whatever we want to call them. Probably easiest to start getting used to calling them EPPs because that's the sort of code, that's the regulatory words that they're using. But so we approve the, and I'm looking now to get the specific language from our code. So we approve the, give me 1 second. Standards for accreditation and certification of teacher preparation programs. So we approve what OSSI uses to certify teacher prep programs. And, as OSSI was talking about, we only have jurisdiction over the programs that are in DC, not those for where, a majority of our teachers don't come from schools in DC. But there are some options and things to talk about there in terms of what schools in the district are doing a good job, right? And I think we Alistair and I talked a little bit earlier about UDC's programs and those types of things being exemplars in certain areas, and we should sort of hold those up to the light and show them as good examples of what we want. And in the leadership report that Emily sent out as well about our meeting with Aussie, was that only yesterday? Yesterday. Seems like a week ago already.
I know.
There is certainly interest in hearing some recommendations about sort of what we think would be good in terms of being able to push the needle a little bit. And I think Aussie and Emily, please tell me if you think this is wrong, but I feel like OSSI is actually really sort of on board with us in terms of how do we push in terms of things like science of reading and teacher diversity. How do we use what the levers that we have to push that? And I think it's more than just necessarily through our public hearings. You know, I think we could together work with CCSSO and with NASB as well to create some recommendations for all states to consider, you know, moving forward with regulations that would have an impact on the increase in the science of reading or on teacher diversity, those types of things. And I think we can think broadly as well as locally on these types of issues. Emily,
I think
does
that's
that
a great idea.
make sense?
Yeah. And I would just add, I think this was in the readout, but Shauna actually perked up and got a little excited about the idea of the state board engaging directly with EPPs and kind of bringing up, because we actually brought up, you know, the fact that we had a panel on literacy and we had asked about what some of the challenges are, and it came up that actually, you know, teacher preparation programs really pushed back on, you know, the idea that they aren't preparing teachers around the science of reading in particular. And so, you know, she was interested in sort of having us maybe partner in that way, as one way that, you know, we would be a value add to their work. I also, you know, raised the question about our advocacy around diversifying our teacher pool. And actually, I just got a meeting invite today from Justin to come talk about the Latinx, the immigrant teacher pathways. So I think they're taking it seriously, that we're interested in kind of helping to do more than just play what's the word I'm looking for? Well, they're interested in our input. I'll just say that.
No, that's
Yeah,
a sea change, right, John Paul?
I agree.
Yeah. So I think we need to, I think that's very important. And I just want to lead into, because I'm going to throw it to Alistair for the next 15 minutes. When I was in education classes at American University before you were born, and that's true.
Alistair was born, Fraser, not me.
I was 1969.
I was one.
And I took a class in the teaching of reading, and I don't think I still have it, but I had it for a long time. This huge textbook on the teaching of reading. Right? I don't remember one thing about the class, and I think that it's so important that the teaching of the science of reading, whatever you want to call it, is mandatory. That for any teacher that comes into DC schools, as part of their resume or part of what they have to have in order to be eligible to teach, that they have to have had a course. How do you feel about that, Alistair? If you say you don't think they should, then I'm cutting you off.
Yeah, I think the question is, how do we do it in a way that gets everyone engaged and on board, right? How do we do it in an inclusive way? How do we do it in a strategic way? How do we do it in a way that doesn't cost the system too much? You know, how do we spend our resources properly to do it? I think is also a big question. And how do we think about our role, not only from the board side, but I think from as a city versus, you know, what structural changes need to happen, right? Because the report from NCTQ that came out, the only school in our surrounding area that scores relatively okay in teaching the reading of science is UDC's graduate school program. The undergrad program there does not. The undergrad program at Georgetown, at Johns Hopkins is not scoring super well either in this, right? So I think we assume that if you get a master's in education, you're learning the skill. But unless if you end up specializing in it, which often requires teachers to go to a master's program, which who's going to pay for that, right? And I think it's actually really difficult to require it, right? Which is why I was so interested when Mississippi and Alabama came to speak with us, because they're offering that particular training to teachers who are already teaching. If we required it, I don't think we would get, I don't even know where we would be able to draw that many teachers from, right? As an entry, when you enter.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. When I was a brand new teacher, there were courses that we had to take within the first 2 years that were mandatory, that all teachers in their first 2 years had to take. One of them was sociology of urban youth, right, which was a very valuable class for probably 90% of the teachers that came into the system from outside of an urban area. And the other class, damn, I want to say it was the teaching of reading, but I'm not sure. But I know there was one other class that you had to take. So all it would take is for the system to mandate it. But see, that was back when you had temporary teachers who became probationary teachers and then became permanent teachers. And you had tenure after you were a permanent teacher. And see, tenure was taken out of the system by Fenty and Michelle Rhee, so that it's going to take a change in leadership mindset for them to understand how important that is. I mean, I agree with you completely. UDC is now starting an undergraduate education department again. They lost a lot of money because when I first started teaching, half of the teachers in DCPS were graduates of DC Teachers College, which was one of the 3 colleges, DC Teachers, Washington Technical Institute, and Federal City College. They became the University of the District of Columbia back in the 70s. All right, but when I first started teaching, DC Teachers College still existed, and the majority of the teachers in the system were graduates of DC Teachers College.
Alistair, when you were speaking, were you thinking of teacher preparation programs for new teachers, or were you just thinking about teachers who are already in the system?
Well, that's the thing, right? I think if one thing we can try to address, the other I feel like is a requirement that pushes the burden down to universities, which I would find possible if those opportunities were already local, but not if they have to go to Mississippi. If we're limiting, who our teacher pipeline is from a very select set of universities and undergraduate programs that we don't necessarily have locally, right? So I actually think there's a few different pieces of this, right? One is the professional development side, right, of the work that we heard from, that Mississippi and Alabama and other states are already doing. Actually, 20 states are doing. We are not one of them, right? And then the other side is what John Paul said, which is, I think, highlighting some of the best practices from groups like Urban Teachers, right, that are preparing students. They've recently made a big shift from to focus more on science of reading, and that's happened only recently. And then groups like UDC, right, that whose graduate programs are already doing this. And I guess my question would be, and this is me, Fraser, just jumping ahead here, if I may. I'm really interested in thinking about how we could convene a conversation between, someone at UDC, someone at the Urban Teachers program at Johns Hopkins, and then some folks at OSCE or DCPS, and then us, right? To have a conversation around sort of what are the, or maybe we start with just the academics, right? But what are you teaching your students who go through this program, and how do we think about supporting, kind of thinking about partnering with them more, right? And yeah, John Paul, I think, I guess so. I think that's what I mean. You're asking if it's a working group, but similar sort of the way that we've been starting with the other stuff that we've been doing, which is more about information gathering first rather than putting out a solution, right? I think this is one of those areas that because DC does not collect the data, we don't have the data, right? So it's not the problem is as bad as we anecdotally understand it to be when we talk with teachers, but not something that I think we have aggregated data around, right? Of, you know, the extent to which teachers in X particular school have received this training or not, whether they got that in their undergraduate program, whether they got that in their graduate program, or whether they've received that through a group like the DC Reading Clinic, right? And I think, to me, that's kind of the first step. If we don't know where the problem is or how bad the problem is, it's very hard to address. But I do think that, you know, bringing in the stakeholders who are already doing this work, namely UDC and Johns Hopkins, right? I think would be helpful, just to kind of get a better sense of what the options are, right? And how they've been thinking this through.
Do you think, Alistair?
Yeah.
I mean, that was fascinating. And what I'm thinking is that, I mean, you talk about not having the data and all this other stuff, but really what we're talking about is trying to educate in the future. And I'm talking about like tomorrow rather than next year. And I was thinking about this Zoom call with us in this committee and OSCE and DCPS and UDC and Johns Hopkins, listening to what UDC and Johns Hopkins talk about as far as their teacher educators in the science of reading.
Yep.
So the OSCE is hearing this maybe for the first time, and DCPS might be hearing it. Do you understand what I mean? So that we'd be at the end of the meeting, we'd all have more information than we had at the beginning. And
the ideal would be to create some kind of pipeline, actually, right? Through our local partnerships, I think, right? Where we had a sense of, right, here locally are where students are learning, and by students, I mean now adult students, right? Are learning, are getting structured literacy training, right? And
so UDC's master's program could talk about that.
Yes. And Johns Hopkins Urban Teachers program could talk about that, right?
And the literacy lab.
I mean, and this is the thing with bringing in other groups, right? Those would not be necessarily credentialed programs.
Okay.
I'm sure it's helpful to bring them in, but I don't want to get.
We need a lot. We would just need a couple or three.
Is there, Alistair, are there any programs that are not necessarily in DC, but that we might be able to identify that like, as I was saying in the chat, maybe that do receive a number of students through DC Tag? Or, so what I'm thinking is how do we identify the HBCUs and the public, the granted program, the land grant universities that do this well, that we send students to, that we might be able to use that as another thing to sort of point to. And then it also helps us then to be able to identify those schools too, right? To be to know who they are so that we're getting those students back.
Do you know about any like Delaware State or Morgan? Does Howard do anything?
So American Howard and UDC's undergraduate program received a B. And UDC's graduate program was the only one that received a score of an A from this last report.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So,
There's
and
so many secrets about UDC you don't know about.
wait, so who does that evaluation, Alistair?
NCTQ. And it's taking the kind of components of structured literacy and just saying, you know, are you covering each of the 5, basically, right?
That would be, but so we wouldn't need a large number of entities to talk.
Well,
I think
there's multiple pieces to this, right, Fraser? I think there's I want to learn, right? So I already had a call scheduled with UDC because I was interested to learn more. There's the learning piece of this. What are you doing? How are you doing it? There's the conversation and I guess relationship building piece where we use our convening power, right, to bring in folks who need to hear it. And I think we need to be thoughtful about who the audience is if we're doing that. And then there's right, and I don't know if these are chronological steps that we take, if they happen at the same time, or there are particular elements of this that we focus on, right? But then there's the piece around, you know, actually making a policy recommendation or, you know, suggesting or building partnerships, right? Using our bully pulpit roles.
can I get onto that phone call with UDC, please? Just let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let her know that there's more interest among folks, and maybe we turn it into it's at the end of this month, something that, you know, more folks can join. But do you see what I mean, Fraser? I think there's plenty for us to learn still because it's not necessarily published aggregated data, right? And so what's our game plan, right? If we were thinking about some kind of project and mapping it out as in some kind of timeline, I would think, you know, we give ourselves some time to just learn what's going on, talk with UDC, talk with Johns Hopkins, talk with Howard, right? Why don't you cover all 5 elements of structured literacy? What's your justification for not? And I would be interested in understanding how they're thinking that through. As well as understanding why the UDC graduate program scored so highly, right? And how they went about, why they made that decision to go that route and how, right? The piece that John Paul asked though around where are our teachers coming from? Do we know? Is that easily?
They're just coming. They're just showing up, kind of thing.
It's one of the things that we've asked for in our teacher data bill, to be more regularly collected, so we actually have an idea of which teacher practice programs. So one of the things that is challenging, right, is that TNTP was collecting some of this data, and then that partnership has now ended with OSSI, and so OSSI is now collecting it directly, but they're not collecting everything that we had hoped for. And teacher prep programs is one of the things that they are not collecting currently.
Why?
I can't tell you why, Fraser. I don't know.
See,
But anyway, but I think there are things like we could still reach out to DCPS's HR and at least get an idea from them of like where are teachers coming from? How do you do recruitment, right? Because you know we've seen some recruitment efforts, you know, from overseas in Puerto Rico for you know, Spanish language and Latinx teachers. Like, how do you do recruitment? Like, what is it? Maybe we can shift it on that angle. Like say, hey, why don't you just recruit at schools that are doing this?
And look, if we're going to have a partnership with OSSI, then we need to gently nudge them to get this information. But I think that I really think I don't want to get away from teacher recruitment because that's part of this conversation too. But I also think with what Alistair is talking about. I'm just, you call me an optimist, but I'm almost convinced that if we had Justin and Shauna in a room with the people from UDC and the people from Johns Hopkins and somebody from DCPS that knows what they're doing in that room, that what they would be hearing from those two universities about the literacy, about the importance of the science of reading would make them interested in partnering with us on that, rather than us pushing them without partnering.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this is me thinking, from my background working with nonprofits, but I feel like this is one of those things that if we could convene, they were interested in, this is a hot enough topic that I think we could get some foundation funding to support, right? In addition to what we spend with public dollars, in terms of helping to build out our pipeline. We know that this is one of the main determinants, right, of how our students are doing. There are programs here that train teachers to do this. How do we standardize it? How do we make it easier for local DC students to go through those programs and then become reading specialists here, right? I think that would be so cool to see, and it would be so impactful, right? That's the kind of, I would love to see that as one of our board legacies, right? Of this particular board, of being able to help plant a seed for. And again, I go back to this question. I don't know if our role is about information gathering and sharing, if it's around convening those conversations and building relationships between the stakeholders, if it's around putting out resolutions and letters to nudge, or if it's around something else.
It's around all of those.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems we should start with information gathering, because
Yeah.
I don't know what these letters, I mean, I would have to look. Thank you for sharing this, by the way, Alistair. So I think information gathering can start with members becoming more versed in this assessment, and understanding what these letter grades mean for each program, right? I don't know what an F means. Does that mean they just don't teach reading? Or what's missing when they have a C, like what, so that's a first step, is just educating ourselves, but then also, I think it would be really useful to hear from UDC what it is they are doing, and for other program chairs to hear what they're doing. I mean, I'm just remembering from our panel, when we asked that question about the challenges, both Alabama and I think it was Mississippi said it was getting the buy-in from the universities. And how do you do that? How do you do it in a way where you're not immediately putting them on the defensive? And I wonder if having it be more of a conversation where we're just trying to learn from one another, and it's sincere, it's not like a setup, because we're not Aussie, right? Like, we are not in a position to make them do anything, but we are hopefully in a position to help them.
But it's there.
So that's just, I mean, that's kind of what makes sense for me as a starting place, and then I think we would understand more about how to go forward if we had.
They're the ones that make the rules about what qualifies a teacher to be a teacher. So it's in their own best interest for reading to be something that should be very important to them.
I mean, when you were in your training program, Fraser, were you part of that whole language movement? Because I was like in the height of it.
I was look. I have no idea.
It's like a religion, and people get very defensive about it. It's not.
No, I know that, and that's what happens with everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I can list the different curricula that we've had in DC public schools for the last 50 years. And every time it changes, there are people that come in like, and this is the thing that's going to solve all the problems, and it's never been solved. All right, but if a kid can't read and a kid can't compute, then a kid can't be a successful student.
No, I know, I agree. I
and
guess I'm just saying that it's not always a rational um, argument that you're working, or like a rational starting place, right? Because I think that where universities or where ed programs get defensive is that we do teach reading, but they're teaching it in this way that has been kind of like it's a religion. It's a cult
just
of
like you
belief.
said, see, if you,
Yeah.
if you talk about high school teachers versus college professors, since I'm both, all right, college professors, especially as they get older, they're not really looking for change at all. And English teachers, AP teachers throughout the country, to talk to them about writers of color or 21st century or late 20th century authors, they've never taught those at all.
Yeah.
That's a battle. And I would imagine that those universities that didn't get an A are saying that, well, they don't know how to grade us. We're doing the best job in the world. Because they're just living on their laurels. And we've got to be proactive as far as that. But I think that having a meeting with UDC and Johns Hopkins and OSSI and DCPS, and maybe just the four of us on the committee, would be a really good start to just listen, just a listening session.
I would suggest not having OSSI there to start, for the reasons I mentioned, just like to make it truly a discussion, and it's recorded, so we can share that. And also note that OSSI does know to some extent what they're doing, because they're the ones who review the programming,
That doesn't
Can I bring
really, don't drink the Kool-Aid on that.
Can I bring it back a little bit towards the work plan from the committee, and how do we? I think this is great. These are great ideas. I just want to make sure that we're putting them into the work plan in a way that makes them actionable. So from start to finish, like I think convening this meeting is a good plan, a good thing to do. And the specifics we can kind of work out, but I want to make sure that that we're going back to sort of what we promised the full board that this committee would do in terms of what we're working on. So I'm just going to put the work plan back in the chat so that we can look at it there, and then make sure that we're also paying attention to all of the things that are coming up that we've said we were going to do in terms of teacher retention and as well as other items as we're doing this. As Caitlin is pointing out to me, this fits very well within the work plan. I just want to make sure that we're putting it for tasks. And I'm assuming that everyone on the committee has now activated their Asana accounts as well.
I have no idea what that is.
Okay. You should be getting an email in, and Alistair, you missed this from the working session. But you should, in your email, have an invitation to create an account on Asana, ASANA, and it is a task system that we are using to implement the work plans. So, and there's a video that you can watch that Alex created as well. So there's some things on that. But anyway, moving back, I think this is a really great idea to do some convening from the committee and just learn more, right? And maybe it's a series of little shorter conversations, 30 minutes, 40 minutes with individual people. And maybe what we do is develop the questions that we're going to ask them, so we know what we're going to ask ahead of time and have it be a structured conversation.
John Paul, I can't even get on to the thing in the chat. Why is that?
Are you logged in using your
Is that
DC
what it
government?
is? UDC? I mean, DC. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why. All right. Well,
We have conduct a review of teacher certification programs, so it seems to fit squarely there, right?
Yep, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, it says that we were going to do that in April. And so I just want to make sure that we're putting, if we're going to start doing it now, that's great. We should do this. But like, what is it? What do we need in terms of, is that a staff level review? Are the members going to be doing this? What does that mean when we're talking about a review of teacher certification programs offered in DC? And are we talking about just the ones in DC, or should we branch it out to the other schools that are providing teachers to us?
Yeah, if we can. I mean, if we can identify those, but I think that what we're talking about, you know, starting with the schools that we have here is a good start to that review. I don't think it's the only thing we should do.
but I think that it might have been Emily that brought up about finding out, you know, after we meet with Johns Hopkins and UDC, maybe it was Alistair, one of y'all, there's only two people, and I didn't say it, is that we meet with AU and with Howard and with GW or Georgetown and find out about their programs and why they weren't rated or why they did make an A. Do you think they'd want to talk about that?
Not if it's framed that way, but I think we can get them just to talk about what they do.
Okay, well, yeah.
And
I would-
you know, I think
would get
that,
somebody
I
more
guess what I was envisioning,
politic
if
than
they
I.
hear what UDC is doing, that maybe that's more inspiring than, like, you know, shaming.
To be honest with you, if Georgetown or Howard were in a room and it said, well, the UDC's got an A,
I know.
why don't you? They'd leave the room.
But that's
Yeah.
why we shouldn't frame it that way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a collegial conversation.
Yeah. Just find out how are y'all doing? We're looking for
Yeah.
ideas about how to teach literacy. And we have heard from other states.
So Fraser, I think this is the next step, right, is going back to what John Paul is saying, which is actually more of a project management question to me, right? It's what do we start with and where do we go from here? I just pulled up the Asana, John Paul, and I just want to kind of go through our teacher practice, kind of what we've got laid out right now. And thanks to Alex for doing this. This is a lot of organizing. So right now we've got only due dates set for develop proposal structure for teacher advisory committee and the Mary Levy report for June 30th. Is that correct? Or am I missing something?
No, so all of this was based off the approved work plan
Yep.
item, right? So those are the only dates that we had listed, and so we're going to be updating these as they go. But he was using it from the master document. So Caitlin is going to be updating this based on the conversations that we have in committee, as well as kind of going through the other things. Amazing.
Okay, so if we go to the literacy plan, we've done our panel on literacy, and I guess this outstanding bullet that you've laid out on committee members read through the EPP rulemaking and come up with questions to ask Aussie at the May working session. Is that still something outstanding? Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah.
And they're joining us in on the 19th. Yeah.
So they were at the working session, and
Okay.
they're going to be back at the next working session as well to do some additional deep dives into, foundation laying of what EPPs are, what our authorities are, what the certification process is like. I think they're coming, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they said they were coming probably to the next 2 working sessions as well, so that everyone is sort of on the same page.
Amazing.
for when we're going to be voting in September, October on the new certification process.
And in the meeting that I missed, sorry thanks for catching me up here. Did we talk a lot about what the literacy sort of, standards are? Okay,
No.
so
No,
those
it,
are some
it
of
was
the
very
questions.
much focused on teacher workforce programs
Yeah.
that OSSI provides, as well as the EPP certification.
Okay,
And the PowerPoint that they provided as well is on Sindly, and so you'll be able to find it there. It should be, I think I actually put it in the email as well for you to take a look at as well. But if there are questions for it, we should definitely know what they are.
okay. So do you want us to come up with, in this plan, is it that we would come up with questions that we share out the way that Caitlin has done in the past so that board members can ask it? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the staff will help as well think of questions that we might have about the process or those types of things. One of the things that Emily and Zachary and I talked with Shauna yesterday specifically, and this goes back to what the leadership report included, is that OSSI indicated that they would be open to and interested in seeing recommendations not only on literacy items, but also on the teacher diversity type pieces too. And so I think this all sort of ties together into what we're talking about.
So do you think if a question was asked about where the teachers come from, it would be in line with that? I'm not talking about the literacy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes along also with the other part of the conversation where we're talking about our teacher bill, about why we think that it is important for us to collect and report that data, right? And we made that argument, I think, when we first submitted the bill, right? That knowing which programs produced successful teachers in the district helps HR recruitment, right? Because we would go back to those programs and recruit more teachers if we knew that they were going to stay for 10 years rather than 1 year, right? So it's a workforce, planning tool, as well as being a data interest as well. Have you all seen as well the letter that Urban Institute sent to Chairman Mendelson about the data needs for the RPP?
Mm-mm.
I haven't.
Let me see if I can find it. I think it just
Is
went
that
out
in-
like.
Is that in Mendelssohn's newsletter?
Yeah, where did
I don't think so, because I think it just came out like in the last few days.
where
But
did you
it does have some interesting ideas about what other things for. They had some specifics on teacher data, if I remember right, that they were interested in. That sort of goes back to what we had asked for as well. But they also had some other things on SEL and those types of things. All right, so I've just shared that in the chat as well.
So can I just ask I know that the teacher data bill was not something that is part of the work plan for this committee. And I guess it would fit more at this point in the advocacy committee, as like a follow-up maybe, I don't know, but is there not room to, since it's so related to the work that is being done here, like how does that work, John Paul?
That's a great question. I think that would be a great opportunity for the two committees to work together.
Okay, good answer.
I mean, this is the first time we've done the standing committees. So I think we're all sort of trying to figure it out. But in my mind, you're absolutely right. Like that is an advocacy outreach and a teacher practice issue. So I think it is something that should be coordinated through all the members of those committees to make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay, all right, I will raise that at the next advocacy meeting.
Would you be our liaison, Emily? Are you the only one in that other one? Okay.
I think so.
Uh,
I don't know, are you too, Fraser? No, I can't keep it straight, so
Yeah, I'm on the, I'm on that one too.
advocacy, yeah. So we can both raise.
Now, what is our time frame, John Paul? Do we have a time frame?
For the teacher data bill,
No, for the meeting, right? For this meeting.
I think it's scheduled for an hour-ish, but I'm going to leave that to Caitlin because she's the lead. So I just talk a lot. She gets
No,
to
no,
go first.
we've got about 3 minutes. We covered an enormous amount of
did.
stuff, which I think is very valuable. Is there anything else that we need to,
I'm happy to take, so on the Asana page, I just want to make sure I'm not dropping the ball on anything here. Could we add a subtask in the literacy plan piece then that, and I'm happy to take lead on this, to, in one of our future meetings, it doesn't have to be our next one or the one after that, but to invite someone from UDC and someone from the,
I'd love
Urban-
to have that for our next meeting.
Emily,
For this committee or for the board?
for this committee, right?
For
I
the
mean, that's what
committee.
we're focusing,
Yeah.
right? So focusing on information gathering, and thank you, Caitlin, for.
And could we have an hour and a half, John Paul? We probably won't use it all,
You
but I'd
can,
like that. Can
I-
we?
that the
I
times that
would,
you want.
I would prefer, Fraser, if we limit their time and use it like for an hour, and then we have another half hour for us to work. Is that okay?
Okay, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
And so when we're in this, just as a sort of teaching moment for Asana, if you click into the subtask that Caitlin is currently creating and click on details in this subtask. So what we will do is we will actually assign this to you and then put a due date and description and all those types of things. But you can also in the thing itself, you can add in the specific people or organizations that you're going to reach out to for this.
And our next meeting is June 8th. Yeah.
I believe that is
If
correct.
it's, yeah, if you guys want to have it for an hour and a half, the thing is that the CISAC is going to have a meeting on June 8th as well. But if we have it for an hour, there won't be like there wouldn't be an overlap. But if we did want to do an hour and a half, then we'd probably want to start the meeting earlier,
So,
or just completely like reschedule it.
We could, we could also do it.
5:30.
Well, we could also do something a little bit different and do it, during a different time. So like during the day, depending on the availability of these individuals, it may be better for them to meet during a work day rather than meeting sort of after hours,
Can we do it at 3 o'clock?
but we can do that as well.
We're currently scheduled 4 to 5:30, right? On Tuesday, the 8th.
It would be from 4 to 5 o'clock.
4 to 5.
Right. So
Because,
could we
yeah.
keep that and we start by seeing if they're free? That's far enough out that I feel like if we proposed 4 to 5,
Mhm.
it's still normal workday hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Where
Caitlin,
is
I'm
the,
just gonna
where is
send
the
an email.
Asana thing, John Paul?
So there should be in your email an invitation from Asana
I don't have anything.
in your DC government.
Nope.
Okay.
Not a thing.
We'll check and send again. So Alistair, I'm putting a due date of this of May 27th, anticipating that we'll need to have that secured and the people identified before Memorial Weekend. But
I'm just gonna, right after we finish this call, send an email out to one person at the Urban Teachers Program and one person at UDC with Caitlin on CC and propose the date. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
I'm not seeing, I see the sub task of coordinating with the advocacy committee. I don't see the, is there one for setting this up, what we're talking about right now?
It's under literacy plan, so right under the Mary Levy report.
Oh, established recommendations. That?
No, the one above literacy plan.
Oh, you have to drop it down. Got it.
Wait, I don't see anything. Who is it? Who is it from?
Wait,
Wait,
you're muted,
from
John.
Asana itself, I'm going to try to send you a link if you'll give me a second.
No, that's fine. I'm just, somehow I lose stuff. I don't lose it, but it disappears.
So I just put a new link in the chat. If you can click on that, I think that might help for you to
Well, see,
create your account.
yeah, but I'm on my that's the chat's on my laptop.
Oh,
I'm looking at my school board stuff on my desktop.
okay. I will send you an email.
Okay. And I'm going to hang on with John Paul while see if I get my email But y'all are, thank you so much. And we'll
Can I
see you soon.
Can I clarify something? So we're only inviting UDC to this first one or to this?
No, I thought.
Sorry, can't hear
you're-
you.
you're
Esther.
muted.
UDC and then the Johns Hopkins Urban Teachers.
Right. And you're doing
program.
both. You're reaching out to both.
Is that okay?
Oh, okay.
make
Absolutely.
sense?
The urban
I was
teachers
gonna say you
program
can
is at Johns Hopkins. Okay, good.
delegate if you want, but
Yeah, I
definitely.
didn't know that either.
I'm also happy for this one to bring in some others, but I feel like we start with the highest
No, you're
ranked,
right.
right?
Yeah, that's who we want. And it's
Okay.
just gonna be us. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Smart.
Okay, I got it, John Paul. I never got that before.
And there's a video that Alex made.
Oh, I can't wait to watch the video.
Yeah, he did a
Man.
great job of doing an orientation for Zachary and I. So
That's great. All right, well, that'll be I'll get up at my normal time of 4 o'clock in the morning and watch the video.
there you go.
Cool.
Thank y'all so much.
Look
Thank
forward
you,
to it.
Fraser.
Thanks,
Have a great
friends.
evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you all.